Hey friend, welcome back to Food is My Love Language. If you're new here, I'm Kim. Today's video is going to be slightly different. Today's video, we're actually going to be talking about my surgery. So if you have been following me for a little while, you'll know that I was scheduled for surgery beginning of December. This surgery was a total hysterectomy with a massive fibroid removal. If that's your jam and you want to know more about the journey and how the recovery's been in the last 3 weeks since surgery, stay tuned. If not, go check out my other videos. So I do have my book here with me because I made notes as I went along, mostly for myself, but I'm glad that I have them now to be able to share with you. So if you see me looking down, I'm referring to my notes because it's some of it's a bit of a blur and some of it's really hard to remember. So let's go back to when this all began. So it was late 2018, and I had felt a little bump in my lower abdomen. And so I made a doctor's appointment, went and saw him, and he sent me for an x-ray. Now, I am not in the medical profession, and so I went for the x-ray, and he did an internal, and the result was that it's a small fibroid. Now, I didn't know at that time that x-rays aren't the best for soft tissue. Anyways, it was a small fibroid. He said, you don't have to worry about it. Most of the time it goes away during menopause. The only time we'd be worried about it is if it's started to grow or got bigger. So I didn't do anything about it. And I thought, okay, well, it'll go away, when I end up going through menopause. Well, fast forward another year later. So now we're in December of 2019. I got really, really sick with what I think was COVID, but who knows? It was about 6 weeks. So from the sort of middle to the end of December, all the way through to the end of January, I was really, really ill. And when I started to feel better early February, I noticed that this lump had grown and my energy was shit. I had to nap every day. I was dropping things in my hands. I was starting to feel chronic pain in all of my joints and all of my muscles. It was a bit terrifying, to be honest, because I didn't know what was going on. But initially, I attributed it to the fact that I'd been really, really sick and I was probably weak and I was going to give it some time. So because this was now the beginning of 2020 and lockdowns were happening and everyone was fearful, I couldn't get in to see the doctor. By the time that I was able to make a doctor's appointment, I found out that he was actually retiring, and so I couldn't even get in to see him before he was retiring. So then it took some time for them to be able to find new doctors to take over his practice and to be able to get in to see them. By the time I actually got in to see them, it was May of this year. So probably about a year after I started this whole process of realizing that this pain in my muscle and joints wasn't going away. I was tired all the time, and this thing in my abdomen was starting to grow. My belly was protruding. I was starting to look pregnant, like very pregnant, and I was very concerned, but I couldn't get in to see the doctors. And then once I got in to see them in May of this year, May of 2021, it took quite a long time to get in to get ultrasound, CT scan, MRI, and all of those other things that I needed in order for them to determine what this was. Anyways, final diagnosis was that it was an extraordinarily large fibroid that had grown exponentially over this time period. In the meantime, I'd moved a couple of times and it was just busy. And so I wasn't prioritizing it, to be honest. And by the time I did prioritize it, it had really, really grown a lot. So that was earlier this year. I was referred to a gynecologist. It took a few months to get in to see him, so I didn't get in to see him until early October of this year. When I went to see him, he said, yes, it's about 15 centimeters. It's a very large fibroid. Gave me all my options. The only option really for me was to have it removed. And because it was inside my uterus, it would have been very difficult to separate it. And I'm almost 50 and don't really need my uterus anymore. So the goal was a total hysterectomy with removal of this fibroid. So removing my uterus, removing my cervix, and removing the fibroid, who I lovingly named Jorge. So everything was set to go, and then I was told it was going to be a 9 to 12 month wait for the surgery because they were backed up because of hospitalizations and so on. Anyways, that was at the beginning of October. I did get them to put me on a cancellation list, and so I found out about mid-October that I could have the surgery on December 7th, so I jumped at the opportunity. I normally close down my business for a month over the Christmas holidays anyways, and so it actually turned out to be really good timing. So I said yes and went into preparation mode. So I had about 5 or 6 weeks to prepare. Now, my son works, it's just he and I in the house, and so there was a lot of things that I needed to do in order to prepare for the surgery. And for the fact that I was going to be not able to do things for quite a while. So I did a ton of food prep, freezer meals, and things that I could easily grab or he could easily grab and heat up, but that was still healthy. You know, clean the house, get organized, all of the things with my business. So that was it was a very frantic 5 or 6 weeks of preparing for the surgery. So one of the things that I did to prepare for the fact that I wouldn't be able to use my abs, or I knew it would hurt to use my abs for a period of time after my hospitalization and during my recovery. And I think one of the best things that I did, to be honest, I mean, cleaning and cooking and all of those things was really necessary, and scheduling, you know, friends to come by and help out, getting a house cleaner for a period of time. All of those things were really helpful. But the most helpful thing that I did for myself before the surgery was to practice moving without using my abs. So standing up and sitting down. I did that for 5 or 6 weeks with the goal of trying not to use my abs, because I knew I would have to sit down on the toilet, sit down on a chair, all of those things that, you know, you normally use your abs for, or partially your abs for, I knew would be really painful. Turns out that was one of the best things that I did, because I was able to sit up and sit down and stand up very easily without using my abs. The one thing that I did not account for and did not practice was getting in and out of my bed. We'll get to that in a little bit. So a couple of other things that I did before the surgery that I think were really helpful and helped me recover much more quickly is, one, I increased my hydration by a ton. For a week before the surgery, I drank a ton of water, and I think that actually did help. I ate a lot of fermented food just because I knew that your microbiome can get a bit messed up with surgery, and I wanted to make sure it was as healthy as possible going into the surgery. So I ate a lot of fermented foods, I ate a lot of probiotics, just to make sure that my gut was as healthy as possible going into the surgery. All right, let's talk about hospital. I knew I was going to be in there for 2 to 4 days, depending on how I was healing and how I was doing. So I needed to pack my hospital bag. And again, I'd watched lots of videos about things that were important. I did bring a few things that I found I didn't even use, but I made a list of the most important things that I put in my hospital bag, which were non-negotiable. If you're going in for the same kind of surgery, I would strongly suggest bringing these things with you. One was a sleep mask. So, of course, the hospital lights are on all the time, and the nurses are in and out doing vitals and checks and so on. And so that sleep mask just gave me the dark that I needed in order to get some quality sleep, even if it was in small stints while I was in the hospital. And along with that, good earplugs. The earplugs that I had were actually not great, but the sleep mask was. I'll link it in the description below. I just ordered it off Amazon, and it totally blacked out everything and didn't touch my eyelashes. So that was awesome. My wireless earbuds I brought so I could listen to meditations, and I could listen to music, and I could watch movies without disturbing everyone around me, because sometimes I was up at 3, 4 in the morning. So that was really important. I got a battery pack for charging my earbuds and my phone and things like that. And it was fantastic because plugs are in a premium in a hospital room. There's 4 other patients in this hospital room. And so finding a place to charge everything and then bending down to plug it in wasn't going to happen. So this battery pack was amazing. I just plugged everything into it, and it charged everything that I needed for the 3 days that I was in there. Cords, obviously all my cords for my phone and my earbuds and everything like that. Hand lotion, my hand and chapstick or lip balm. My lips and my hands were so dry after surgery. Those, I went through a ton of them in the time that I was in the hospital because everything was just so dry. So both of those, and I brought a nail file as well, which did come in handy because if you get a hangnail and you're in the hospital, what are you going to do? You need a nail file. So I know it seems silly, but it was actually really good because it would have annoyed me if I had a fingernail, tear or rip while I was there and I couldn't do anything about it. I did bring cough drops because I had read and seen that often your throat's irritated from the intubation. But I did use them for the first day or so, but I was cautious with using them because, of course, I was on morphine and all kinds of painkillers. And so I was nodding off constantly. And so I didn't want to do that with a cough drop in, but I did find that it was soothing when I did use them. My throat wasn't terrible, but it definitely was irritated. I also brought gum. They want you to chew gum to get your digestive tract moving again, and it also helped with dry mouth. So the gum, I was really glad that I brought it. Hospital slippers because I did laps around the ward that I was on, so that was really good. Toothbrush and toothpaste, hairbrush and hair ties, and those were sort of the most important things that I brought, and I'm so glad that I made that list. As a reminder of the things that really mattered. Nothing else mattered that I brought. I didn't actually use anything else. Those things were absolutely necessary. Okay, let's talk about some of the things that I got before I went to the hospital that I knew I would need when I came back and which were really useful. So I got one of those hospital beds that are on wheels. I know it seems like a crazy purchase, but I thought it would be really handy for sliding, the one that slides under the bed and then there's a table that comes over top. I got it really cheap on one of our used online sites, and so I picked it up. And that's where I put all of my medications and things like that. So I had a small container. I had stool softener, natural laxative, Tylenol, extra strength, Advil and Tylenol, Gas X, gum, cough drops, lip balm, nail file, and lotion. I also bought some compression underwear. Absolutely a requirement for the first few weeks. I got some nighties that were really easy to slip on and off, knowing that bending would be hard and getting on any kind of jammy bottoms. And I got some slip-on slippers that were super comfy with faux fur inside of them, so they felt really good on my feet. Then, of course, you've got all the surgery prep the night before your surgery or the day before your surgery and the day of your surgery. So it's been 3 weeks today. Mine was on December 7th. And so I arrived at just after 7 a.m. and you have to go through the admission and get into your gown and your hairnet and all of those things. I was so nervous. So I've been a single mom for a long time. I'm his only parent. And so the thought of anything happening to me during surgery was just causing me massive anxiety. But I just tried to breathe. I listened to some meditation because it took a while to be wheeled up to the OR because my surgery wasn't until 9:30 in the morning. And so I got wheeled up to OR where I saw my surgeon, my gynecologist, who was also my surgeon, and the whole OR team. And they were so sweet. The anesthesiologists were fabulous. The OR nurses were fabulous. I can't say enough about them. They were just amazing. One of them held my hand because I was having a few tears just because of the anxiety. So they were really great. And so they wheeled me into the sterile room. And of course, I already had my IVs hooked up. And the last thing I remember saying to the anesthesiologist was, "You're going to make sure I'm knocked out cold, right?" And I don't remember anything after that until I woke up. So I woke up in the pre-op room, so not on the ward, where it was basically one-on-one nursing. And I remember being really thirsty. I didn't have any pain at all. I just knew I'd had surgery and I was really doped up. So I was really, really out of it. And I was there till 4 p.m. that day, probably partially because they were waiting for a bed on the ward for me. But also they wanted to obviously make sure that I was okay before they took me up to the ward to recover there. So I was back on the ward or I was on the ward that I was going to be on to recover from, about 4 p.m. I got up there. I had the morphine button, of course, so I could hit it whenever I wanted to. The nurses were in and out taking vitals. My son and my sister actually got to come and visit me, and I found out long after, well, actually on Christmas Day, that I had been very specific with my son while I was really doped up on morphine about the Christmas present that I wanted, including the color, where he could get it, and so on. I don't remember any of that. I don't remember that evening at all, really. It was about 3:30 in the morning, so that was 4 p.m. About 3:30 in the morning the next day, I suddenly felt sort of awake and energized, and I wanted to get up and get moving. And so I called one of the nurses, and she said, sure, if you want to get up, let's go for a walk. And so she, kind of helped me get out of bed and threw my hospital slippers on, grabbed my IV pole, and off we went. And we did 2 laps around the ward. And I felt really good. I knew that walking was important to help with gas and blood clotting and all of those things. And so it felt really good to be up because I'd been laying in the bed for, a day and a half at that point. And so it felt really good to get up and moving. And so that was really good. That was about 3:30 in the morning. That day, so day 2 after the surgery, I didn't have any food, but lots of fluid. So I just drank a lot of apple juice and a lot of water. And that was really good because, again, I was so dry. I don't know why I was so dry, because I was really hydrated and they were giving me fluid, but I just felt really dry and tired, like my body was tired. And so my surgeon came in and visited with me later that day on day 2, told me the surgery went really well. They took the fibroid, the uterus, and the cervix. He was going to leave the ovaries unless he saw something sinister. There was nothing sinister. He said they were actually really, really healthy. So he left those in, and I'm so grateful that he was able to do that. So that was good. He said the fibroid was massive. I had noticed that there was a horizontal incision. And when I'd seen him originally, he'd said that he'd probably have to do a vertical incision just because the fibroid was so big. Like, it went up over my belly button. It had grown that much. And so he did a horizontal incision, and I asked him why he was able to do that. And he said that the fibroid itself, fibroids are usually hard and rubbery, like elastic bands. And mine was blobby and vascular and massive. So he was able to pull it out of this horizontal incision, which I was, quite grateful for, because it's very low down, and so it won't be particularly noticeable. Okay, day 3. So my surgery was on a Tuesday. This is now on a Thursday, and I was actually discharged that day. Was I discharged that day? Yes, I was discharged that day. Later, way later, like in the evening, actually. So on day 3, I had a little bit of solid food, and I had been up on day 2 several times walking around the ward, and the same on day 3. I had little bits of food, but as you know, hospital food is horrendous. And I don't know how they think that people can get healthy living or recovering on that food. But anyways, little tiny bits of food through the day, lots of fluids again. They wanted to get me off the morphine because I was really wanting to get home. I knew that recovery was going to be much easier and better for me at home, in my own bed, in my own home. And so they got me off the morphine drip, and they put me on the oral opioid pain meds. I did have a quick shower that day at the hospital. They wanted to make sure that I could get cleaned up. And so I had that at the hospital, which was fine. But again, it's a big, open, cold shower, and there's 4 other patients, who are using the bathroom. Anyways, it wasn't my jam, but I had a little shower. Nurses taught me how to change my bandage. So everything was sutured. My incision was sutured. And then there were those steri strips over the top of it. I'll put a picture up here. It's kind of gross, but that was the Thursday, actually. And then there was a full bandage over it, which needed to be changed every day. So they showed me how to do that. Here's a tip for you. We had a major problem getting the opioid prescription filled because they sent me home with Dilaudid. Really hard time getting that filled. That evening, the doctor called it into the pharmacy. Turns out the pharmacist actually refused to fill it because it wasn't a triplicate or it wasn't handed in, physically. And so my sister, who's already had a number of surgeries, said to me, we need to get that prescription and make sure that it is being filled by the pharmacy before we leave here, because once we leave here, we won't have the opportunity, to come back and say, oh, we didn't get it. So anyways, it took a couple of hours. We finally got confirmation from the second pharmacy that it was called into that they were going to be able to fill it and we would be able to pick it up. So we did that, and then my sister took me home. So that was Thursday night. Let's talk about crawling into your own bed when you get home. For me, getting in and out of bed and getting comfortable in bed was so hard. That was probably one of the hardest parts of my recovery. Trying to lay down even onto pillows, like, elevating yourself a little bit with pillows, even doing that was so hard because you have to use your abs. And I tried to lay on my side and move over and, do it every way except using my abs. It's virtually impossible. And then if you need to rearrange yourself in the middle of the night, it's a nightmare. So I really relied on my son a lot. I would get into bed and then he would come and I would be able to hold onto his arm and kind of use that to pull myself up in the bed to rearrange or, lay down comfortably. A lot of pillows helped. I had a pillow between my legs. I had a pillow on either side of me. I had several pillows behind me, and that really helped. But I have to say that was probably one of the hardest parts of being home is not having just the pain of moving around in bed. Sitting up, standing up, sitting down, standing up, totally fine. I'd been practicing for 5 weeks, didn't need to use my abs at all, was totally fine. But the getting in and out of bed and getting rearranged in bed, so hard. So I read a lot about gas pains and how gas pains can, kind of move around your body and you can feel them in your neck and so on. I was terrified of that happening. So I did a lot of little laps around the house as often as I could just to make sure that things were moving. I chewed a lot of gum to get my digestive system moving. I ate little bits of fibrous food, which I think really helped. I had my compression panties on, so that sort of held everything in. And I was taking my Gas-X and my stool softener and my laxatives. And the gas pain was horrible, but mine stayed in my abdomen area. It never moved up to my neck or my back or other things that I read or watched of these poor women who had these gas pains kind of move around. Mine didn't do that. Mine were strictly in my abdomen, but I'll tell you, it was not a pleasant experience. And getting my digestive system moving and the Gas-X that I took was totally, totally critical, I think, in moving that gas through. The gas stayed for probably the first 2 weeks, but got better and better every day. So that was Friday. Saturday, I switched to a different opioid. They wanted me on a less heavy opioid. And so I switched to one called tramadol, but it was still another opioid. I'm telling you, the opioids were no good for me. I was so stoned. I was nodding off all the time. I couldn't string a sentence together. I'm sure it was helping with the pain, but I felt like I couldn't function at all or have conversations. And so by that Saturday night, I decided that I was going to stop the opioids and just do extra strength Tylenol and Advil. One of the worst parts of my recovery was the withdrawal from these opioids. It was horrendous. So that was Saturday night. I had my last opioid pain med. By Sunday night, I was having shakes, nausea, felt like I was going to vomit. I had the sweats and just exhausted. And that lasted for a full 2 days. So all day Monday and all day, yeah, half a day Sunday, all day Monday, and probably half a day Tuesday was the worst part by far. So anyways, I was glad to get off of them. So since then, I had only been doing extra strength Tylenol and Advil, and I was doing it I was having those probably every 4 to 6 hours fairly regularly. I didn't find the pain horrendous. The pain originally was purely incision pain. I didn't actually have any pain internally. I had kind of pressure, but it wasn't painful. But the incision certainly was painful. It felt very stingy, very burny. And of course, there's not much you can do about it except take your pain meds. So that wasn't pleasant. So I was continuing, except for those 2 days that I feel like I was going through kind of an opioid withdrawal. I was walking every day, a couple of times a day, probably maybe 2 or 3 blocks, nothing serious. And I call it the granny shuffle. It was very slow, long steps, like wide steps, really kind of pulled at my incision and made it hurt a lot. So I took very small steps, and 2 or 3 blocks was about all I could do at any one time. So now we're about a week post-op. I'm kind of having small meals again, or still. My appetite has decreased so much since before my surgery. I was craving sugar and carbs, and I was exhausted all the time before my surgery. Since my surgery, I have had so much energy. I feel like I could run a marathon. I can't run a marathon right now. However, I feel like I could. And my appetite has dwindled to next to nothing. I have the smallest amount of food and I'm full. I'm not craving. I'm actually craving food that's really good for me and feels good in my body. So, but I'm actually still eating fairly small meals. I find that I get full really quickly. So I don't know why, but anyways, we're at a week post-op here. So at about a week and a half post-op, I've made a note here that I had taken my extra strength Tylenol, 2 of them, at 7:30 in the morning, and at 7:30 p.m., I realized that I hadn't taken another dose. So by a week and a half later, I was going like 12 hours between pain meds, which just kind of speaks to how manageable the pain really was. And that was really good, less stinging at the incision site. And that was my first day without napping, was day 10 after the surgery. I was taking naps through the day. Even though I was really energized, my body was really tired, and it was, it was doing a lot of healing. So it was important that I rested when I felt like resting. So by day 11, I've got a note here that was much easier getting in and out of bed and rearranging myself in the night. I wasn't needing my son's help anymore to do that. So last week on Tuesday, that would have been December 21st, I had my 2-week follow-up with the doctor. Now, he was really hoping to have the lab reports back that had the pathology, the weight, and I wanted photos of the fibroid as well. He didn't have those, and now they're on holidays. It's been 3 weeks today since my surgery, but they're still on holidays, so I'm really hoping to get those back soon, because I think it'll be really interesting to see what this fibroid was all about. The doctor did tell me that he reiterated that my ovaries were really healthy, and so he didn't need to take those at all. He said my entire digestive system was pushed out of place by this fibroid, so it's no wonder I was having a lot of digestive issues before the surgery. My uterus had actually attached itself to my bladder, so that had to be surgically separated. And so 110 stitches between internal and external, which feels like a lot. He did have a look at my incision. He said it's healing well. And he kind of gave me the okay to go ahead and start exercising gently, lifting weights gently. He said just kind of go about doing your daily life, but really listen to your body. He said if you overdo it, you will know. Not at the time probably, but afterwards. I didn't listen, and I sort of jumped back into my life. It was Christmas time. I was cooking dinner at my sister's house. I was going for extended walks, and I just sort of went back to living my normal life. I wasn't lifting a lot. I still didn't feel like I could lift a lot, but I was definitely bending easily and carefully. And that lasted for about 2 days until I had realized that I had really overdone it. Even just that little bit of additional what I was doing was way too much. My insides this last week were so sore. I had about 3 days of absolute agony over Christmas internally, not my incision, but internally. It was so painful. And I just didn't, probably I should have done a lot less. I did too much too soon. So lesson learned, do very little and do more in small increments. Even what I thought was doing very little was too much, and I paid for it for sure. I had been off my painkillers for a day or two, and I had to get back on painkillers, just the extra strength Tylenol and Advil, but I was back on those for these 3 days of absolute agony. So other than that, I'm healing really well. I'm feeling better today and yesterday because I've been resting a little bit more again. And I actually have had a couple of naps as well, just because I know that sleeping is really important with the sleep schedule, and my sleep schedule is a little bit off. I haven't had any weird hormonal things happening, with the exception of having hot sweats again, hot flashes again, which had stopped a few months ago. So those are back, a little more milder and infrequently, but there's definitely a little bit of hormonal stuff going on, but not crazy awful. And I think overall, I just feel really good. You know, watching some of these videos can be really intimidating. I remember just being terrified going into the surgery and thinking about all the what ifs, all of what could happen. And I had a wonderful client who made me a beautiful meditation that I listened to many times prior to surgery and during healing. And I just kept really positive about what was going to happen and how I would feel after. I'm so excited because I have had 2 years of chronic joint and muscle pain that is gone. It is no longer there. I'm not dropping things out of my hands. My hands feel strong again. Whatever was happening with this fibroid and my insides was affecting my whole body big time. And so I'm so grateful. I have tons of energy. My muscle and joints are not hurting at all. My incision is healing well. I feel like I'm doing really well for 3 weeks post-op. And I don't think it's about comparing myself to someone else or you comparing yourself to my experience. They're all going to be a bit different. But for me, I am so grateful that I had this surgery and so happy that I made that decision. And I'm really thrilled with my recovery and what I feel like now in comparison to what I felt like before. So I hope that was helpful to you. I will definitely continue to update you once my doctor has these pathology and lab reports, and I go see him again at 6 weeks, so I will probably do another update then. In the meantime, I hope this was super helpful. Feel free to drop any questions you have below. I'm happy to answer anything purely based on my own experience. Again, it won't be your experience, but I hope that sort of eases your mind about going into this surgery, or if you're even considering the surgery, just to share my own experience with you. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for sharing this experience with me, and I will continue to keep you updated. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel if you do want updates. See you soon.